Welcome to the Character Lore Shorts Compilation, where I slice together every character lore bits shorts that I've made, so I hope that you enjoy. Did you know Barbara hides a really fascinating secret in her character stories? And it's the fact that while she primarily uses a catalyst in-game, she actually knows how to use a sword. Well, I say no loosely because she wasn't really good at it. When she was younger, she would always want to surpass Jean in even just one aspect, since she sees her sister as a paragon of success. However, and I quote, "Be it swordplay, her grades, or anything else, she couldn't compare. Even for someone as optimistic as her, she found herself to be upset and down." Hang in there, Barbara! Did you know that this character was first seen in the game as a male? Genshin has its fair shares of mistranslations, especially when it comes to the genders of certain characters. This is because of either purposeful concealment for future reveals, or just straight up lack of pronouns mentioned in the Chinese versions. One of these examples is actually Arlecchino, who was first mentioned in the world quest, The Very Special Fortune Slip. This was one of the first mentions of the Arlecchino lore bits, and when she was formally mentioned in the earlier versions of the story, Ilian and Ephim called Arlecchino Lord Arlecchino. However, when Arlecchino was formally seen in the Senora funeral, the world quest was edited to say Lady Arlecchino instead. Let's just say that there were a bunch of theorizers, myself included, who found this really inconvenient since it took 1 to 2 months before they actually fixed it. You know what's a really fascinating duality in Genshin? Raiden A's most traumatic moment is when her sister died in Conria. And as an Archon and god present in the Cataclysm, she most likely knows the devastation caused by the monsters of the Abyss and whatever machines the Conrians created that even brought forth the Cataclysm. So imagine the strange irony that her magnum opus was actually created with Conrian techniques. The puppet-making techniques that Raiden A used to create Wanderer, and most likely also the Raiden Shogun puppet we know today, have Conrian roots, as stated in Wanderer's character story. What an interesting turn of fate, huh? Did you know that Wanderer keeps a pretty adorable secret? And it all has something to do with his hat. Or rather, the ultimate question of what is underneath that thing. Because the game is lying to you. What's supposed to be under his hat, or maybe he hasn't put it there yet, is a small doll that has white clothes, black hair, a waistband knotted into a butterfly, and a round tear. According to Wanderer's character profile, he learned how to make toys during his visit to the Treasure Street. There he met a kind fellow who taught him how to sew, and Wanderer practiced and practiced, until this little doll was finally complete, an imitation of the doll his old friend made that burnt down in the house during the cremation. Wanderer considers that if he put the doll in his hat, it would feel like having a travel companion, so just note that he has that somewhere on his person at all times. These melons have a pretty sad role in Genshin's story. Lavender melons and the illness of the Tatarigami have a fascinating connection over the years, and one of the most prevalent is Wanderer's character story. When Wanderer's young friend was still sick, he would bring him melons, fruits, and water to drink, which proved to inevitably be fruitless considering the kid's affliction with the Tatarigami was too strong for just simple house care. But did you know that lavender melons were also used as a desperate attempt to cure the Tatarigami in the future? These are notes from the pharmacist's notebook. The pharmacist Yasumoto was supposed to help the people of Higi village, but he couldn't do anything about it. So as a form of self-deception, he would just give people lavender melon soup. So he ended up doing all of this just to make himself feel better as a coping mechanism. And Desperado reminds me of a certain puppet. Stupid question, but which came first in Genshin's universe? The game Chess or the shape of the Gnosis? Okay, this sounds weird, but characters like Aimiko and Albedo have referred to it as a chess piece, and Piero uses it in his game. Not to mention, other variations of chess exist in Genshin's universe, like Ningguang's own variation of it, and Ayato and Thoma playing shogi. Did the gods create the shape of the Gnosis based on the game of chess, or did the people create the game chess based on the shape of the Gnosis? Did humans just look at the statue of the Seven and wanted to make a game out of it? Like they saw the word freedom in Barbados' statue and were like, oh, this piece can move in any direction except L because Barbados doesn't take any L's. Or did humans create the shape and were the gods like, hey, that looks pretty cool? Have you ever noticed this about Fischl and Oz? Fischl's the only playable character that has a non-living living being conjured by her vision. Okay, I promise I'm not crazy, but Oz is a really fascinating outlier when it comes to familiar summoning characters because he isn't really like the rest. Amber's Baron Bunny is a doll that she makes. Xiangling's Goba and Itto's Ushi are separate entities that met Xiangling and Itto along the way, but Oz isn't like that. Oz manifested alongside of Fischl's vision, but he talks and acts like a separate person altogether. So why is that? Well, it's possible that Fischl is Oz. And Allecchino's vision represents an ambition or a desire. And maybe Oz isn't just because Amy likes the book he's inspired from, but also because Oz is a representation of Amy's desire to be understood. He's her translator so she can be in character all the time, while having her meanings still be articulated. And when Amy comes out, Fischl's persona pushes over to Oz acting weird. Well, that's just a theory anyway. Subscribe for more character lore bits! Venti is a character who has half-truths and secrets as a prevalent theme to his story. He has all sorts of skills like fabrication, illusion-making, storytelling, pilfering, and even forgery. Yep, Venti used to forge Johnny's signature to play pranks at the DOR con. But that skill actually became an important asset that turned Mondstadt's history on its head. After 1,600 years of history, Mondstadt had fallen into the tyrannical rule of the aristocrats. But after Barbados returned, there was a famous treachery against the wind, where the soldiers found a secret treaty between the aristocrats and the deity Rex Lapis. The soldiers feared that they would be slaves in a foreign land, and thus turned tail on the aristocracy. It wasn't until years later that historians would discover that the treaty was fake. Subscribe for more character lore bits! Itto is actually the master of copium takes, and here's why. We know that Itto's a bit of a wild one when it comes to his day-to-day endeavors, and in his character details, did you know that Itto is a little offended if you say he's completely unemployed? Itto claims to be the first and greatest head of the Arataki gang, the responsibilities and duties of which he tried to explain to some Tenryo Commission officials when they came to him to investigate a rather harmless street brawl. Unfortunately, they interrupted him not 2 minutes into the explanation before marking him down as unemployed. But Itto argues that there's a lot that he does, like how Itto makes sure that he is working odd jobs for 1 day before taking 3 days off. As such, a more accurate designation should have been 3/4 unemployed. Quick question, but how did Childe get his vision? Almost every other character in the game that has ever received a vision has a corresponding story that aligns with how they got it and what it means to them. Everyone except Childe. And we know that this is a Hydra vision because he does have an About the Vision line where he says he'll basically take anything if it makes him stronger. So the question is, how did he get it and when did he get it? Well, I have a guess. He fell into the abyss when he was 14 and was taught by the swordswoman named Skirk for 3 Tyvadian days or 3 abyssal months. The frame of the case gives us a hint that he most likely received the vision itself in Snezhnaya after his training, with the fact that his abilities mirror that of the Herald being a testimony to his time in the abyss. That's mostly it. So the real question is, if the answer can be that simple, why is Hoyo going through all the lengths of hiding it? Is there something about Tartaglia's vision connecting him to the monsters of the abyss? What did he see down there? While most animal characters have lost friends in the past, Heizou's friend was treated almost like a catalyst to him receiving his vision. It was during a festival that he met a friend who claimed to be from a wealthy merchant family. The friend brought him books and toys from other nations, but Heizou realized that his friend's clothes were always filthy, which isn't something that a rich merchant's son should have. Unfortunately, his friend immediately admitted to lying to him, and that the gifts were actually stolen. Heizou was furious and confused, and yelled that they weren't friends anymore. He threw away what was given to him except for a single green pebble, a rock that they fished out of a stream together. It wasn't until in the near future that Heizou would meet his friend again, bleeding out after a fight with a man who tried to steal his Mora purse. Heizou tried to save him, but it was too late. What was inside that purse, though, was the other pebble. It was here that he realized that what Heizou wants to fight against was the sins of the world, and perhaps by realizing this, instead of holding a pebble, he held a vision. You'd think ships don't have their internal lore, but Kazuskara's lore outside of the game is wild. Kazuskara began all the way back before Inazuma when Kazuha was leaked around 1.4. And let me tell you, Genshin fans ran with it. One Inazuma short boy and the only other Inazuma short boy? Sign me up. But then, the theories started coming out and they came out wild. When Kazuha was leaked to have a friend from Inazuma, people started theorizing it was Scaramouche because of the mysterious bottled messages from Dragonspine. Then when this 2.2 image leaked a mysterious figure in the back that almost not really we were going insane was Scaramouche pre-Fatui. It even got to the point that when the name Goro was leaked, people assumed it was Scaramouche's real name. But honestly, everyone was just fine shipping this crack pair who never met before because they're not real people. That is, until the 2.6 lore dropped and the shippers went, wait a minute, that wasn't part of the plan. Nobody expected or even asked for actual Kazuskara connections in universe. From rare pair to being a pair with actual lore backing. Wild. Is Hoyoverse allowing Archon leaks? This is going to be the only time I ever discuss leaks on this channel, but there's a popular conspiracy theory that is unconfirmed that Hoyoverse has varying degrees of unspoken allowance to certain character leaks. Twitter users notice that Hoyoverse has lax actions and security when it comes to Archon leaks versus every other character. Fossil lore has already been leaked to the public almost at the same distance to patch as when Raiden Shogun was shown when it was still 1.5 and Kusanali when it was still 2.6 to 2.7. They noticed that most of the time, leakers get access to a character 1 patch prior to their formal announcement. So these users speculated that Hoyoverse is churning out the Archons much faster than other characters as a form of marketing and publicity stunt to create hype for the new nation. What are your thoughts on this conspiracy theory? Subscribe for more Genshin weird bits. Warning, arachnophobia. Genshins and humans have their own weird share of food choices, like snow, flowers, bitter tea, but the weirdest of them has got to be Albedo's signature cuisine.
Truly ancient trees usually grow to around 1 or 2 miles in height. Oh, and there's a kind of large spider that lives around their roots. If you tie one up in Cape jasmine and lemongrass, and sprinkle on some cardamom, smoke it for a few hours, you get a fragrant taste that's simply unforgettable.
But I got curious. Can you actually eat spiders? Well, I did a quick Google search and about 15 species of spiders are scientifically described as being edible, with a history of human consumption. I got this from a good old reliable Wikipedia page though, so what even is Dottore? Yes, he started as a human turned into whatever he is now, but the question is he still human? Well, I'm not entirely sure, especially not this version at least. Simulacra and homunculi are very real things in Genshin, such as Albedo's chalkiness and Wanderer's mechanical properties. Not to mention that in Wanderer's character story, it says that Dottore actually used Scaramouche's origins as a puppet who used Conrayan techniques as a foundation for his grander experiments. And it's from these that he created his segments. So the question is, what are these things even made out of? And where's the original Dottore? Did he get poofed along with the other segments? Is this the original Dottore and he's just got divine skincare routines? What's going on here? There's been some debate whether it's accurate to say that Morax is the Geo Archon when he had the whole shebang about resignation and dying from the sky, so let's talk about that. Celestia doesn't care. Morax's death was for the people to take the lead in Liyue and usher a new age. While Morax says that he's no longer the Geo Archon, it's more so about him just passing on the torch, but not actually Liyue having no god like Conria. Archonhood doesn't just disappear when your Gnosis is taken, or else Yaimiko would have been the formal Archon of Inazuma for a while. It's dictated by an active demon god dying or being existentially removed to truly create a succession of the title, hence why we had that big war in the first place. Heck, it could even be accurate to say that there's a foundational principle out there that all 7 nations must have an immediate replacement of a demon god in the event that something were to happen to the current one. Baal and Beelzebul, Rukkhadevta and Kusanali, and then the old and new Fontaine Archons. There's hardly a gap in the transition, so no, Ningguang is not the Geo Archon of Liyue, and neither is Cisaritsu who currently has the Gnosis. We've been shown multiple times the level of loyalty that the Vigilant Yaksha has to the Geo Archon, but the real question is, why? Well, Xiao's character stories opens us to the sad tale of his time not as the Vigilant Yaksha, but as a slave to a cruel god during the Archon War. In the fables of another land, the name Xiao is that of a spirit who encountered great suffering and hardship. Back in a younger, more naive time, a god had gotten a hold of Xiao's weakness and forced him to serve as their bloodhound, in which he was forced to perform cruel and violent acts. Many died at his hands, many hopes were crushed, and he was even forced into devouring his victims' dreams. His past of service under the evil god had rid Xiao of his innocence and gentleness. All that remained within him was the means to kill and the weight of his sins. Finally, on the battlefield of the Archon War, Morax, the Geo Archon, had a fateful encounter with the Yaksha's master. Rex Lapis liberated the Yaksha and gave him the name Xiao. The Inazuma Archon quest ended a good 1 to 2 years ago, but there's still one important question that has yet to be answered in the lore. And that's the, why were there no electro visions produced during the time of the Sakoku decree? Even A has no idea why this was the case.
Really? So in all this time, no new electrovisions have appeared in the outside world? Well, what I can say on this topic is subject to certain constraints, but it is not by my will that visions are granted or denied. The key is people's desire, and, well, there's another side to it too.
Are visions connected to Celestia playing matchmaker with Archon and Allegine? Is A's hesitance towards visions the cause of the accidental banning of the electro visions? Was A's vision hunt decree an accidental spiting towards the gods that gave the visions? Or maybe it has nothing to do with the Archon. Well, I guess I'll have to wait 3 more years to know this. Did you know that there's one knight title in Genshin that's actually shared by 2 people? Well, as far as we know, each of the Knights of Favonius have a distinct title, either defined by blank knight or the captain of a team. For example, Jean is known as the Dandelion Knight, Eula is a Spindrift Knight, Frederica is known as the Alder Knight, and Amber is known as the Crimson Knight. But if you look at Klee's theme song, Klee is referred to as the Crimson Knight as well. But formally, Klee is known as the Spark Knight, so that's a fun fact. Eula doesn't want vengeance on people. Like, with how often she says that vengeance shall be hers, or her status as a noble, you'd think that her Malfoy-like threat is honest and true. But actually, it's not. When conflict arises, Eula fights back with a sternly worded threat to indicate that she will remember this grievance, and make the offending party pay for it one day. It seems to work like a magic spell, because as soon as these words are uttered, the conflict ceases immediately without ever having to escalate to the level of an all-out confrontation. So I guess when Eula finally finds someone that really does want vengeance, oh boy. So what's with Kuki Shinobu's mask? Well, the Oni mask was something that she had after joining the Arataki gang. In her character stories, while pursuing a certain business prospect, Shinobu was busy engaging in some serious talks. The other members of the gang were arrayed behind her in a single row, hands behind their backs and unsmiling. She started wearing the mask more when a kid pointed at her and said that she looked so cool. The Arataki gang were struggling not to laugh, but failed miserably, as in the next martial demonstration, their faces were so beaten in that they were redder than Shinobu's at the moment. If only they had known their fate, perhaps they may not have laughed so hard. From that day on, Shinobu would sport that mask. Pitch black and claws bared, it lent her a positively demonic aspect. And by the way, it was also the martial demonstration that served as the origin of her moniker, the Demonic Deputy. Keqing tried really hard to distance herself from the idea of gods. In her vision story, she once believed that this purple crystal had stolen the pride due originally to her, and that it was both a challenge and an insult from the gods. In fact, she had tried to destroy her vision countless times. She's left it in a huge fire for 3 days and 3 nights, ran over it with a minecart full of rocks, and even hurled it from the heights of the Jade Chamber. Unfortunately, she has never been successful. With no options left, and not wanting it to fall into the wrong hands, Keqing was forced to accept the vision as a part of her life. There is a legend about a spring fairy that circulates in Diona's hometown. The fairy once saved a mother and son who had despaired beside a well, filling the barren hole with rushing waters that pooled and formed a spring. The child, deathly ill, was miraculously healed by those spring waters. Many people came to catch a glimpse of those blessed waters and built a settlement around it, and left it not thereafter. Over time, this gave rise to the small town known as Springvale. Nowadays, few are left who believe that this is any more than a mere legend, and some even dismiss it as myth-making for tourism's sakes. Only little Diona believed in the existence of the spring fairy, and on nights when her father was in a deep stupor asleep, she would speak to the moon reflected in the spring water's surface. These were her earnest feelings, innocent and wonderful. So, Diona would make a curious friend, a companion whom she could bear her feelings to and sometimes assuage her loneliness.